I never thought my marriage would end on a train platform in the middle of nowhere, but that's exactly where Derek left me. Stranded, humiliated, and completely alone. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, like you were just a prop in someone else's story, then you'll understand what I'm about to tell you. And if you're watching this from wherever you are in the world, drop a comment and let me know, because I need you to know you're not alone in this. None of us are. Make sure you check the description box below for more stories like this one, stories about people who refused to stay down when life tried to break them. My name is Laura Hendricks, and I'm 42 years old. I've been married to Derek for 19 years, or at least, I was married to him until 3 months ago. For most of those years, I believed I was building something real. A partnership, a life. But somewhere along the way, I became less of a wife and more of a servant. Less of a person and more of a punching bag for his ego. It started small, the way these things always do. Little comments about how I loaded the dishwasher wrong. Jokes about my weight at dinner parties that left everyone laughing except me. Moments where he'd make plans without telling me, then act annoyed when I didn't already know. Over time, I shrank. I stopped arguing. I stopped asking questions. I learned to anticipate his moods, to smooth over his irritations, to make myself smaller so he could feel bigger. And then came that Saturday in September. We were taking the train from Portland to visit his mother in Eugene. It was supposed to be a short trip, just for the weekend. I'd packed our bags, made sure we had everything we needed, coordinated with his mother about timing. Derek sat across from me the whole ride, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. I remember watching the landscape blur past the window and feeling this hollow ache in my chest, this quiet realization that I couldn't remember the last time he'd really looked at me. When we pulled into the Albany station for a brief stop, Derek suddenly stood up. He grabbed his bag from the overhead compartment and slung it over his shoulder. I thought he was just stretching his legs, maybe getting off to buy a coffee. But then he turned to me with this cold, almost clinical expression. "Get off here," he said. I blinked, confused. "What?" "Get off the train, Laura. You need to learn some responsibility. Figure out how to get to Eugene on your own." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to crack a smile and say he was kidding. But he just stood there, impatient, like I was wasting his time. "Derek, I don't have my wallet. It's in your bag. You said you'd hold it because my purse was too full. Then you'll have to be creative, won't you?" He turned and walked toward the exit. I scrambled after him, my heart pounding. "Derek, please. This isn't funny. I can't." He spun around, and for a second, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Or guilt. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "You've been coddled your whole life, Laura. Maybe this will teach you something." Then he stepped off the train. I followed him onto the platform, my legs shaking, my voice rising. "Derek, don't do this. Please." He didn't even turn around. He just kept walking toward the far end of the platform where the train to Eugene would continue without me. I stood there, frozen, as the conductor blew the whistle. The train lurched forward, and Derek climbed back on without a single glance in my direction. I watched the train pull away, carrying my husband, my wallet, my phone charger, and any shred of dignity I had left. The platform emptied quickly. Within minutes, it was just me and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I didn't cry right away. I think I was too shocked, too numb. I looked around, trying to orient myself, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do. The station was small, barely more than a covered platform, and a tiny waiting area. There were a few benches, a vending machine, and an old payphone that probably hadn't worked in a decade. I reached into my coat pocket, hoping maybe I'd left a credit card or some cash there. Nothing. Just a crumpled receipt and a stick of gum. My phone was in my purse, but without my wallet, I had no ID, no money, no way to prove who I was. Panic started to creep in. Real, suffocating panic. How was I supposed to get to Eugene? How was I supposed to get anywhere? I didn't even know anyone in Albany. I hadn't been here since I was a teenager. That's when I heard the soft whir of a motorized wheelchair behind me. I turned and saw her. An elderly woman, probably in her mid-70s, with silver hair pinned back in an elegant twist. She wore a navy blue cardigan and pearl earrings, and despite being in a wheelchair, she carried herself with a kind of quiet authority that made you want to stand up straighter. She was watching me with sharp, assessing eyes. Not judgmental. Just aware. "Rough day?" she asked. Her voice was raspy but warm, like whiskey and honey. I tried to smile, but it came out shaky. "You could say that." She wheeled closer, studying me with an intensity that made me feel both exposed and strangely comforted. "Let me guess. Man trouble." I let out a bitter laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "Honey, I've been around long enough to recognize the look. You've got that stunned rabbit expression people get when someone they love does something unforgivable." She paused, tilting her head. "He left you here, didn't he?" I nodded, and to my horror, my eyes started to burn with tears. I blinked them back, but she saw. "No wallet, I'm guessing." "No wallet. No phone charger. No way to get anywhere." My voice cracked. "I don't even know what to do." She was quiet for a moment, then glanced over her shoulder toward the parking lot. "My caretaker's coming to pick me up in about 10 minutes. But before she gets here, I need you to do me a favor." I frowned. "A favor?" "Act like you're my niece," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "My caretaker's name is Monica. She's a sweet girl, but she worries too much. If she sees me talking to a stranger, she'll fuss. But if she thinks you're family, she'll relax." I stared at her, confused. "Why would you?" "Because that man who just left you here?" She leaned forward slightly, her eyes glinting with something fierce. "He's going to regret it. I happen to own half the real estate in this town, sweetheart. And if you play your cards right, I can make sure he regrets a whole lot more than just this. If you've ever had a stranger show up in your life at exactly the right moment, you know how surreal it feels. How it makes you question whether you're dreaming or whether the universe is finally paying attention. Because that's exactly how I felt standing on that platform, listening to this woman, this stranger, offer me something I didn't even know I needed. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, a way to make Derek wish he'd never walked away. Her name was Evelyn Marsh, and within 20 minutes of meeting her, I realized she was nothing like the fragile old woman I'd assumed her to be. Monica, her caretaker, arrived in a sleek black SUV, and just as Evelyn had predicted, she barely blinked when Evelyn introduced me as her niece Laura, visiting from out of town. Monica was young, maybe late 20s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. She helped Evelyn into the passenger seat, folded the wheelchair into the back, and gestured for me to climb in. "You're lucky Mrs. Marsh was here," Monica said as she started the engine. "This station's pretty dead on weekends. You could have been stuck here for hours." I nodded, still too stunned to form coherent sentences. Evelyn caught my eye in the rearview mirror and gave me the smallest, most conspiratorial smile I'd ever seen. We drove through Albany in silence, the late afternoon sun casting everything in shades of amber and gold. The town was small, quiet, the kind of place where everyone probably knew everyone. We passed a diner, a hardware store, a little park with a gazebo. It looked peaceful, unremarkable, but Evelyn's earlier words kept echoing in my head. I own half the real estate in this town. Monica pulled into the driveway of a large Victorian house on the edge of town, the kind with wraparound porches and stained glass windows. It was beautiful in that understated old money way, the kind of house that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. Monica helped Evelyn out of the car and into her wheelchair, then turned to me. "You staying for dinner, Laura?" I opened my mouth, unsure what to say, but Evelyn cut in smoothly. "Of course she is. We have a lot of catching up to do." Monica smiled, clearly pleased, and wheeled Evelyn up the ramp to the front door. I followed, my heart pounding. Once we were inside, Monica excused herself to start dinner, and Evelyn gestured for me to follow her into a spacious living room filled with antique furniture and shelves lined with books. She wheeled herself over to a large bay window that overlooked the backyard and motioned for me to sit on the sofa across from her. For a long moment, she just studied me, not unkindly, but with a piercing sort of curiosity, like she was reading a book only she could see. "So," she said finally, "tell me everything." And so I did. I told her about Derek, about the years of small cruelties that had built up into something unbearable, about the train platform, the humiliation, the fear, about how I'd spent 19 years trying to be enough for a man who made me feel like I was never quite worth his time. Evelyn listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, her fingers drumming lightly on the armrest of her wheelchair. "He sounds like a coward," she said finally. "The kind of man who only feels big when he's making someone else feel small." I nodded, my throat tight. "That's exactly what he is. And you want to make him pay for it." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. And the truth of it hit me like a punch to the chest. Because yes, I did. I wanted Derek to feel a fraction of what I'd felt standing on that platform. I wanted him to realize what he'd thrown away. I wanted him to hurt. "I don't know if I should," I said quietly. "I don't know if that makes me a terrible person." Evelyn laughed, a dry, knowing sound. "Honey, wanting justice doesn't make you terrible. It makes you human." She leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you something about men like your husband. They don't learn unless they lose something they actually care about. And from what you've told me, the only thing Derek cares about is himself." I felt something shift inside me. A spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Real, righteous anger. "What are you suggesting?" I asked. Evelyn's smile was slow and sharp. "I'm suggesting you let me help you. I've been in this town for 50 years, Laura. I know everyone. I know which businesses are barely hanging on, which properties are about to go under, which people owe favors. And I know your husband works in real estate development." My eyes widened. "How did you?" "You mentioned his company name when you were talking. Hendricks and Cole Development. I've heard of them. They've been trying to buy up properties in Albany for months now, trying to get a foothold in the market here." She paused. "What if I told you I could make sure that never happens?" My heart started to race. "You do that? Why?" "Because I'm old, and I'm bored, and I've spent my whole life watching men like Derek get away with treating women like disposable objects." Her eyes gleamed. "And because you remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who deserved better and never got it." There was a weight to her words, a sadness that hinted at her own story. But before I could ask, she straightened in her chair, all business again. "Here's what I'm proposing. You stay here with me for a few days. We'll figure out a plan. I'll make some calls, pull some strings, and we'll make sure Derek's little real estate empire takes a hit. A big one. And in the meantime, you figure out what you want your life to look like without him." I stared at her, my mind reeling. This was insane. I barely knew this woman. And yet, something in me knew this was exactly what I needed. "Why are you doing this?" I asked again, my voice barely a whisper. Evelyn's expression softened. "Because someone should have done it for me once. And because revenge, when done right, isn't about cruelty. It's about reclaiming your power." I took a shaky breath. Then I nodded. "Okay, let's do it." Evelyn smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had just declared war. If you're someone who's ever wanted to fight back against the people who hurt you, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next? Let's just say Derek Hendricks had no idea what was coming. And honestly, neither did I. The next 3 days at Evelyn's house felt like stepping into an alternate reality. A reality where I wasn't invisible, where my voice mattered, where someone actually listened when I spoke. Evelyn moved through her day with a kind of calculated precision that was mesmerizing to watch. She made phone calls, lots of them, speaking in that calm, authoritative tone that made it clear she wasn't asking for favors. She was calling them in. She had Monica bring her files from her study, thick folders filled with property deeds, contracts, and correspondence. She'd spread them out on the dining room table and go through them with the focus of a general planning a battle. And I watched. I learned. I started to see the woman my husband had dismissed so casually for what she really was, a force of nature. On the second day, Evelyn explained her plan to me in full. Derek's company, Hendricks and Cole Development, had been aggressively pursuing several properties in Albany. They wanted to build a mixed-use complex, retail spaces, condos, the usual gentrification playbook. The project hinged on acquiring 3 key parcels of land, all of which were owned by local families who'd been resistant to selling. Evelyn owned 2 of those parcels. Derek didn't know that, of course. The properties were held under shell companies and trust names, layers of legal protection that kept her name out of public records. But she knew exactly who was trying to buy them. And she'd been stalling, watching, waiting for the right moment to make her move. "He's been offering lowball prices," Evelyn explained, tapping one of the contracts with a manicured fingernail. hoping these families will get desperate and sell. Classic bully tactics. But here's the thing, those families trust me. And if I tell them not to sell, they won't. I felt a chill run down my spine. So you're going to tank the entire deal? Not just tank it. I'm going to make sure everyone knows why it failed. I'm going to make sure Derek's reputation in this industry takes a hit so big, he'll spend the next 5 years trying to recover. It should have scared me, the cold calculation in her voice. But instead, I felt something else. Relief. Vindication. Power. That night, I finally called Derek. I used Evelyn's landline, my hands shaking as I dialed the number I'd known by heart for nearly 2 decades. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello. It's me," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. There was a pause. Then, "Laura, where the hell have you been? My mother's been asking about you. Not are you okay? Not I'm sorry. Just annoyance that I disrupted his plans." "I'm in Albany," I said. "Where you left me." "Jesus Christ, Laura, don't be so dramatic. It's been 3 days. You couldn't figure out how to get a bus ticket? Borrow someone's phone." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar wave of frustration and hurt. But this time, it was tempered by something else. Resolve. "I did figure it out," I said quietly. "I figured out a lot of things, actually. Good for you. Now when are you coming to Eugene? My mother wants to see you." "I'm not coming, Derek." Another pause. Longer this time. "What?" "I'm not coming to Eugene. And I'm not coming home either. I want a divorce." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. "Are you serious right now? Because of one argument?" "It wasn't an argument. You abandoned me. You humiliated me. And you didn't even care. Oh, for God's sake. I was teaching you a lesson. You're too dependent, Laura. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I am standing on my own 2 feet. That's why I'm done." His tone shifted then, from condescension to anger. "Fine. You want a divorce. Go ahead. But don't expect me to make it easy. And don't expect to get anything out of it." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "We'll see about that." I hung up before he could respond. Evelyn, who'd been sitting quietly in her wheelchair nearby, gave me a slow, approving nod. "Well done." But the real turning point came the next day. Evelyn called a meeting with the 2 families who owned the other parcels Derek needed. We met at her house, around that same big dining room table. The families, the Carters and the Daltons, were warm, hard-working people who'd lived in Albany their whole lives. They were polite to me, though clearly curious about who I was and why I was there. Evelyn got straight to the point. She explained Derek's tactics, the pressure he'd been putting on them, the lowball offers. And then she told them who I was. Derek's wife, soon-to-be ex-wife. The room went very, very quiet. Mrs. Carter, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, looked at me with something like pity. "Honey, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "Just don't sell to him. Please." Mr. Dalton, a gruff man with a thick mustache, crossed his arms. "We weren't planning to. But now. Hell, I wouldn't sell to that man if he offered me double." Evelyn smiled. "Good. Because I'm going to make sure the whole town knows what kind of man Derek Hendricks really is." And she did. Over the next week, word spread fast. Evelyn had connections everywhere. The local newspaper, the town council, the business association. She didn't have to lie or exaggerate. She just told the truth. About Derek's aggressive tactics. About how he treated his own wife. About the kind of man he was when no one was watching. By the time Derek realized what was happening, it was too late. The deal fell apart. His business partner, Cole, started distancing himself from the project. And Derek's reputation took a nosedive. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. I felt free. If you've ever walked away from something toxic and felt that mix of fear and relief, drop a comment below. Let me know I'm not alone in this. And check the description box for more stories of people who took their power back. Derek showed up at Evelyn's house 2 weeks later. I was in the kitchen helping Monica prepare lunch when I heard the doorbell. Something in my gut twisted and I knew. I don't know how, but I knew it was him. Monica went to answer it, and I heard his voice, smooth, polite, the version of Derek he used for strangers. "Hi, I'm looking for my wife." Laura Hendricks. I was told she might be staying here. I walked into the hallway before Monica could respond. Derek stood in the doorway, looking thinner than I remembered, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. Laura! His voice was clipped. We need to talk. No, we don't, I said, my arms crossed. His eyes flicked past me, searching for someone. Is this some kind of joke? You're staying with a stranger. She's not a stranger. She's been kinder to me in 2 weeks than you've been in 2 years. Derek's jaw clenched. I don't know what kind of story you've been spinning, but the truth, Derek. I've been telling people the truth. Evelyn's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Mr. Hendricks, how kind of you to drop by. She wheeled herself into the hallway, her expression serene. Though I'm afraid you're not welcome here. Derek's eyes widened slightly as recognition dawned. You're the one who owns half the real estate in this town. Yes. Evelyn smiled, sharp as glass. And I'm the one who made sure your little development deal went up in flames. You're welcome. Derek's face turned red. You had no right. I had every right. This is my town, Mr. Hendricks, and I don't tolerate bullies. For a moment, Derek looked like he wanted to say something. To argue, to threaten, to do whatever it took to regain control of the situation. But he must have seen something in Evelyn's eyes that told him it was pointless. Because he turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw something that might have been desperation. Laura, please. Can we just talk? Alone. I wanted to say no. I wanted to slam the door in his face and never look back. But there was a part of me, a small, aching part, that needed to hear what he had to say. Needed closure. 5 minutes, I said. On the porch. Evelyn gave me a long look, then nodded. I'll be right inside if you need me. Derek and I stepped outside, and the silence between us was suffocating. He shoved his hands in his pockets, staring at the ground. I didn't mean for things to go this far, he said finally. What did you think would happen, Derek? You left me stranded with nothing and expected me to just come crawling back. I thought you'd learn to stand up for yourself. I thought, he broke off, frustrated. I don't know what I thought. You thought you could treat me however you wanted and I'd just take it. Because that's what I've always done. He looked up at me then, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Regret. Real, genuine regret. I was an asshole, okay? I know that. But Laura, we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out. No. He blinked. What? No, Derek. We're not fixing this. We're done. You're throwing away 19 years because of one mistake. I laughed, bitter and exhausted. It wasn't one mistake. It was 1,000 little cruelties that added up until I didn't even recognize myself anymore. You didn't leave me on that platform, Derek. You left me years ago. I was just too afraid to admit it. His face crumpled, and for a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. So that's it? You're just done. Yeah, I'm done. He nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging. Then he turned and walked away without another word. I watched him go, and I waited for the heartbreak to hit. The grief, the doubt, the fear. But it never came. Instead, I just felt lighter. Evelyn was waiting for me in the living room when I came back inside. She didn't say anything, just handed me a cup of tea and gave me a knowing look. Thank you, I said quietly, for everything. She waved a hand dismissively. Don't thank me yet, honey. The hard part's still coming. What do you mean? Rebuilding. Figuring out who you are when you're not defined by someone else. That's the real work. She leaned back in her wheelchair, studying me. But I think you're going to be just fine. And you know what? She was right. The divorce took 6 months to finalize. Derek tried to drag it out, tried to fight me on every little thing, but Evelyn's lawyer was better than his. In the end, I walked away with enough to start over. Not rich, but comfortable. Free. I stayed in Albany. Evelyn offered me a job managing some of her properties, and I took it. It turns out I'm pretty good at it. I've started taking classes in real estate, thinking maybe I'll get my license. Build something of my own. And Evelyn, she's become more than just a friend. She's become family. The kind of family you choose, the kind that shows up when it matters. I think about that day on the train platform sometimes. About how lost I felt, how small. And I think about the woman who saw me in that moment and decided I was worth saving. Not because she owed me anything, but because she believed I deserved better. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt invisible or dismissed, or like you were just an afterthought in someone else's life, I see you. And I'm telling you, you deserve better too. Check the description box for more stories like this. Stories about people who refused to stay broken, who took their lives back, one choice at a time. Because that's what I did. And if I can do it, so can you.